everyone, Dave here. Thanks for coming along to another episode of Legends of the Spire. Great to have you with us. Whether you're listening on wherever you get your podcasts or watching on YouTube, this is the podcast that speaks to the former players of Chesterfield Football Club, but also the fans as well. I should be back next week with some former players. Lots of them want to record at the end of the current playing season because they're with clubs, but we have got a few that I'm recording this week and next, so looking forward to getting them back out and get up to that 50 recorded episodes with former players. But in the meantime, I have the Spireites boys with me this week. SpireitesWrite is a podcast created by Chesterfield fans for Chesterfield fans, very much about the current events that are happening at the club, with previews of matches and reviews after they happen, and also just commentary on things that are happening, of which this season there have been many things happening, as you know. We had a chat about starting a podcast, the highs and lows of it being a Chesterfield podcast, and also which players they think will be the legends and villains of tomorrow that are in the current squad, so interesting to get their thoughts. You can find them on SpireitesWrite on all social media channels. They've built up a really good community there, so please do go and give them a follow. And as always, I am at Spy Legends on the same social media channels, so find us on things like Twitter and Instagram, and Legends of the Spire on Facebook too. But here we are with the latest episode as I caught up with the guys from SpireitesWrite. How did your podcast begin then?
So we've had a website for longer than we've had a podcast. Actually, it all started with a meeting in a pub where all good things start between me and Oxley, and we decided that we wanted to do something for Chesterfield fans by Chesterfield fans, and it sort of all spiraled on from there. And then probably during sort of May time 2020 was when it all really kicked off with the podcast during lockdown, when we didn't really have a lot else going on. We wanted to do something to sort of take up our time during lockdown, and we just did the podcast, and we really enjoyed doing them, didn't we, lads?
I mean, we wouldn't still be here. We wouldn't still be here if we didn't enjoy it. It's a bit crazy because usually in life I'm not the kind of person who's very good at committing to doing something every week, but with the podcast it's just a bit of a no-brainer really, because we do all really enjoy doing it, and we've had some really good times recording odds down the years. We get to speak to some interesting people like yourself, Dave, and obviously we're all passionate about Chesterfield as well, so it's nice to be able to have a sort of space to rant every week when being inevitably let us down.
Did you ever expect anyone to listen to it?
No. When we set it up, we were genuinely happy with, I think the target was 10 listeners. That was the aim. And I don't know, but I think the first episode surpassed that, and we went, we might be onto something here. And then we just carried on doing it, and here we are nearly 100 episodes later. I think we're on like 90 now.
Oh, it's 95 or the last one.
95, something like that. And we're just still doing it. People still listen. And until the day comes where nobody else listens, we'll keep doing it.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when I started mine, I thought about doing a podcast, and then I asked Jamie Hewitt, and Jamie Hewitt said yes. And I didn't actually think about it beyond that at all. So I recorded the interview with him, and then I edited it, and it was only after I published it that I thought, oh, actually, I might have to do more than one. Did you start it thinking you were going to do it as a weekly thing, or was it just to see what happens?
No, I think it was always a plan to do it every week, wasn't it? That was kind of how we started. I mean, we did have a few episodes. I think the first 3 or 4 episodes were back in the John Pemberton era, I want to say. Then obviously he got sacked, and not all that long after that, COVID happened, and then we picked it back up again. And then after that, it's been pretty much every single week since. So we had like 1 or 2 episodes and a break of like a year, and we started up again, if you know what I mean. But since then, it's been every week, and we haven't really looked back, have we?
Yeah, because if you look on all the names of our original podcasts, like the first 10, they're all just like Notts County away or Willstone at home. And we're just going to name them after as we do in the pod now. We watch the game, talk about the game after, and we just try and come across as 3 people in a pub after a game who moan about the football match that they've just watched. And when we set it up, it was just moaning. You know, there weren't a good thing happening in any matches that we watched.
It's funny actually, because I was going to ask whether how you talk about Chesterfield footballs has changed now that you know it is going out. Now that you are in essence broadcasting about footballers, like you can't go and say, you know, I always pick on Robbie Weir, poor Robbie Weir, but I remember being quite vociferous about Robbie Weir. But now, if I'd probably be less stowed, because obviously for my podcast, I think one day I might get Robbie Weir on. So I better not say anything horrible now about him. That's looking less likely. But do you find it with yours? Because obviously you have that notion that some players might listen to it at some point, even if it's just a little snippet of it, and then pass things on.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a funny story about that actually, because I put my mobile number on our Facebook page, and we actually got a text from Hayden Hollis about the podcast, because I think we'd been slagging him off for a few weeks when we were in a bad run of form, and we just got a text of Hayden saying, "No, cheers lads for your support in that last podcast, but it does get on your brain a little bit when people are slagging you off in the media." So I mean, that was a real eye opener for us as to, wait a minute, the players actually do listen. And when we spoke to Tom Bendon as well, he says that there are a few members of the playing staff who do listen to the podcast. So I'd say that, yeah, definitely don't want to completely rip into players, because they might be listening and you don't want to like destroy the confidence, do you? So
yeah,
I genuinely think the only player which we've ever slaughtered is Ollie Soderberg. And anyone only has to read our Twitter feed to know my opinion on Ollie Soderberg. Because 9 times out of 10, if you read one of our tweets, it's done by me. So I'm fair game. He's the only one where I just say worst player, worst everything. A bit like Jason Lee on Soccer AM when he's talking about Chesterfield. He's like worst player, worst place, worst dressing room. He's the only one who fits.
Surely you've got to try and get him on for the 100th episode. I shall get.
You mentioned earlier, you mentioned you played for, it was 18 different clubs. Some of them twice, so 21 in total. So we thought that we'd play club mates with you. It's like teammates, but the questions are about your old clubs, okay? So it's kind of quick fire, you know. So we start off with, if the clubs that you played for, who had the best changing room?
Watford. I'll go for Watford.
Yeah.
Worst changing room? Specifically the worst showers?
Worst changing room, worst stadium, worst everything, Chesterfield.
Okay, worst everything. That's the end of the item. Right.
Why? What was
It was horrible. The old Saltergate, it was disgusting. When I signed for them, they brought me on a premise that, guess what, we're going to get a new stadium, you're the record signing, we're going to move to this. I didn't see the new stadium. It was just horrible.
Who served up the best food?
Forest.
Yeah. Okay.
Worst food?
Worst food, Chesterfield.
Where have you been that's had the best nightlife, best night out?
I don't know. I'd say Ilkeston. Wow, I've never been out of Ilkeston. No, Nottingham. I'd say Nottingham.
Yeah.
Worst nightlife?
Chesterfield.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think I'll just echo what the other two said, really. I think, generally speaking, it makes you think more about the players' mindsets. That it definitely has for me. It's made me think a lot more about what the players might be going through. It's made me almost humanise them a bit more in my head, because I feel like as football fans, we do have a bit of a tendency sometimes to dehumanise, especially referees who get a lot of abuse. And I'll admit, I'm the first person who should be slagged off for that, because the one on Monday, I tore into him, it has to be said. But I think you realise when it's your own players and they are listening that they are human beings and they've got lives outside of football, and I think that's a really important thing to sort of just bear in mind when you're saying things. Do you know what I mean? Because you've got to put yourself in their shoes and think, if I was listening to a podcast about me, what would I want people to say? And I think if people were slagging me off, I'd really not like that. So it definitely does have an impact for sure on what you say.
I remember when Drew Talbot, I was speaking to him on mine, and he was talking about the penalty conceded at Forest Green Rovers or something like that, the season we went down from League Two. And he was like, it's just frustration. And then you watch it back on the video and you can see him like on the deck after giving that penalty away and kind of what he was going through. And you do kind of start to realise that actually, and no doubt some of them live it more than others, and some of them care more than others. That's only human, but you do realise it's probably not necessarily the career it's cut out to be. There's so many players that talk about, I got to that point in my career and I couldn't be bothered to go to training, I couldn't be bothered to do matches. And you think, you're a professional footballer, you shouldn't be saying things like that. But I suppose you do, like in any career, get to that point, don't you? I just like, I can't be bothered for this. But it's nice when you've got players that are likeable, isn't it? We seem to have a likeable bunch of players now, which makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got a lot of characters in the current playing squad, haven't we? Like Gavin Gunning, for example, who just comes across like absolutely mental. Sure, you want to get on the wrong side of it on a night out or something like that. And everyone in the squad seems so friendly. I mean, Tom Denton as well. When we spoke to him, he's a proper friendly bloke. He had plenty of funny stories to tell. So yeah, lots of good characters in the squad.
So am I right in Tom, not a Tom, other Tom?
Yeah.
Run the Twitter and stuff?
Yes, I am the one behind the Twitter account.
So I wondered what you'd learned about the Chesterfield support since you started it, because obviously you get then a lot of people giving you feedback. You become like a voice after defeats and things like that. What have you learned about Chesterfield fans that you didn't know?
Don't do player ratings anymore. They went after a few weeks. Facebook put an end to them. I think Matt and Tom were there. I think at one week I put one on, I got 20 comments, and I think everyone just called me an idiot. I think genuinely, it was like, who does these? Who's this idiot? So what I've learned is don't do player reviews anymore, because it's not worth the backlash. But you do see, well, you see it in the likes and the retweets, actually. If we're doing well, they go up. If we're not doing so well, they go down. You see it in the replies. You just get more interactions. Normally, if we're actually doing bad, more than we're doing good. It's weird, really. But yeah, you do see it. You do see the ebb and flow of the season a lot more, running the Twitter account and just being that voice or that brick wall that people can scream into after a defeat or screaming joy if you win.
Yeah, it must be quite nice to just be a bit of an additional outlet to all of the official club stuff, because obviously the official stuff, club stuff, it's obviously got a certain narrative to it because it's run by the club. They can't say certain things, and that's fair enough. So it must feel quite nice that you've built an audience that then you can kind of do what you want with it in a way.
Yeah, it is. I think we get away with everything apart from swear. I don't think I've ever sworn on a tweet, and that's the policy. That's the only rule in the podcast, as well as you can say anything, do anything, just don't swear. But yeah, it's good. I do have digital marketing background. I do marketing as a living. So the Twitter account's more of a hobby than anything else. So I just do it for a bit of fun, like you said. And as you can see, that GIF that I put out halfway through the Halifax game, for example, I'm the John Coleman going, I'm falling out of love with the game. Genuinely, at that moment, I was discussing to Tom going, I'm playing cricket next Saturday, I ain't going to watch Dover. Genuinely, I'd gone at that point. I'm like, please get picked for the cricket team so I don't have to go and watch.
So we'll go to Tom A. So any favourite moments on the podcast? I'm guessing the Tom Denton was a highlight, but any kind of big highlights of podcast times?
Yeah, we had a period a while back where pretty much every week or every other week we'd get on fans of opposition clubs, and in doing that we've met some really interesting people, it has to be said. We've done a couple of collabs now with Glover's Cast, the Yeovil Town podcast, and they're a great bunch of lads, to be honest. Like whenever we go on with them, we have a laugh and really interesting conversation normally. So I'd say more of a general rather than like specific highlights. I'd say just going on with fans of other clubs and doing the interview pieces as well. Obviously, like when we had Tom Denton on, or I know Matt did one with Will Evans a while back as well, that kind of thing. I think it's sort of a way to bring a different side of the game to our listeners, if you know what I mean. And I really appreciate that opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed going on the Chelsea one. The Chelsea one was good fun. But they get like a ridiculous amount of listeners. It's like tens of thousands or something. You're like,
Bloody hell.
how'd you do this?
You'd be freaking, wouldn't you?
They're all very professional in what they're doing. You're like, wow. But I mean, I felt in a little bit of a way they were kind of pitying me in a way, because they were like giving me a round of applause at the end for coming on and talking about Chesterfield. It's like, don't pity them.
Well done, yeah. Woo!
But they were very nice, and so it is nice, isn't it? I've struggled with, because on my kind of Twitter account and stuff, there's obviously a lot of podcasts of other clubs, but you find if you follow a lot of podcasts from other clubs, you get a lot of, the timeline can just be full of Stockport have scored another goal. Aren't Stockport great? Oh, all that Stockport played. And I'm just like, so I had to get to the point where I unfollowed a few podcasts because my timeline was just becoming less Chesterfield.
It was you. It was
then
you that they were tweeting
them.
about. You upset them.
I think I did upset them just because sometimes, like, and I followed like the Notts County one at some point and stuff like that. But yeah, sometimes it just gets a bit much, like seeing too much alternative content. I just wanted to see Chesterfield stuff. So I probably upset them, maybe the Stockport one. I'm sure they'll get over it. They're going to win the league, so we can go. So what's the future then of the podcast? So what are you just going to carry on doing what you're doing for now, or do you have any grand plans?
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of the podcast, I think we'd like to carry on with what we're doing for as long as people are going to continue listening to it, like Oxley mentioned earlier on. But there's a lot of stuff we'd like to do with the website. I think in the sort of in the near future, we wouldn't mind getting Y Scout set up. The only issue is it costs quite a lot of money. But once we get that, it basically, for people who don't know, it's a massive database full of football stats for mainly used by scouts and journalists. So we want to get hold of that. And then once we've got that, we can start to do a lot more written pieces on our website as well. So that's sort of like the aim in the future. But yeah, for now, we're just seeing where things go. I know that you're interested in setting up a fanzine for Chesterfield as well, or something like that. So anything like that, we'd love to get involved in. Really, it'd be great.
Yeah, I'd really like an old style paper fanzine, because I used to love them. I remember when they used to sell them outside, like on the walk to Saltergate, they'd be selling them just on the street. So I think it would be nice to do a totally paper. There's no digital version of it, so it is only available paper-wise. And maybe do like 4 a year, do like one a quarter or something like that. It would be quite fun, wouldn't it? We're just considering a name for it. So if anyone's got an idea of a name, I quite fancy calling it Linda's Sandwich Shop. Or, or like Randall's Gospel Squad, because that was the Sunday morning. Everyone that didn't play on the Saturday had to do the Gospel Squad on the Sunday morning. So if anyone has any good, we'll call it Soderbergh's.
Soderbergh Squadron.
Yeah.
Soderbergh safe hands.
So we'll call it something. Yeah.
It's a bit like our name of the podcast lets us down now, because it's SpireitesWrite. It was named because we were going to write. We've come too far now. I can't change it. That's what we're known as. So
it's the last article we actually wrote. I think it was the playoff one last year, wasn't it?
Last year, yeah.
12 months ago, I think, was the last article that we actually wrote. So there you go.
Spireites don't write.
Yeah.
Obviously, my podcast is about legends, and your podcast is about current footballers and current team. So, as a bit of a merge, which current Chesterfield player, you can only pick one, in 10 years' time will we look back on as the biggest legend? Either because of what they've achieved elsewhere or what they've achieved with us. What do you think?
Abby Shamanga.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be. He's going places, that kid. How old is he now?
24, isn't he?
25, something like that. I genuinely think he could already play probably at League One level. I don't think he'd look out of place there. And I could see him going on to the Premier League in the future. I genuinely can. I think he's got his head strapped on right, and he's got the sort of right mentality for it as well. So, yeah, I reckon Kabongo Shamanga is a name to look out for in the big leagues.
Everyone in agreement? Any other names?
I'm thinking like the other end now, because you could go like one of the older team, members of the squad and think as manager, you know, you could go at that end. You wouldn't want Gav Gooden as your manager, I don't think. Could you imagine?
The pre-match interviews would be interesting, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like folk heroes for Chesterfield, I think Tom Denton will go down in history. We will be talking about him in 30, 40 years as, you know, I remember when we all called him the GO and things like that, because it has become a bit of a meme now, hasn't it? And so, yeah, I think in the future, maybe people will look back on Denton in those terms as well.
And which player, if any player is going to play like 300-400 games for us in the current team and be like the person that's here for like 10 years, who's that going to be?
Ooh. Jamie Grimes. That's what I'm going with. The Viking. I don't think he's got another 10 years in mind, but
no.
If he could stay with us forever, I think I'd take him.
I can see Maguire staying for a while, to be honest. I think he's already the best sort of play out from the back centre half that we've got. So we know that he fits into Paul Cook's style of football. He'll probably be here next season at the very least. And yeah, those players, you know, came through our academy. He's a local lad. And yeah, I can see him staying for ages and really being a mainstay for us.
Yeah. Isn't he already our... Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was going to say, isn't he already our longest serving player anyway? I want to say he's been here for like 7 years.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. On I think on eBay at the moment, there's a bit of training gear from like 5 or 6 years ago that someone's selling on eBay, and it has a number on it, and it is Maguire's squad number from when he was like number 37 or something. So you can buy Lawrence Maguire's tracksuit top, I think, on eBay at the moment, about 25 quid from a few years ago.
I must have that one, isn't it?
I definitely think he was the one, because amongst all the players at the moment, he's the one that I think if we kept offering him contracts, he wouldn't probably look elsewhere. As long as we were offering him something, I don't think he'd look elsewhere in the same way that like a Blatherwick or someone like that, or even like a Jamie Hewitt. You know, you could see when Maguire's 32, 33, he's scoring the goal at the end of a match that does something or other in a cup run or a championship or something like that. So, all right, so who is going to be the cult hero? So who is going to be the person that people look back on and go, God, he was a bit bonkers, or he was a bit special, or he was really good, but how come he never did anything? You know, who's that guy?
That's got to be Tom Denton, hasn't it? I think. I mean, if you think about it, we had some great players the last time Paul Cook was here, but the one player that still gets mentioned 7 or 8 years later is Armand Nandrier for me. That you hear him being brought up constantly, and he was that kind of player, wasn't he? The enigma, shall we say? You never knew what you were going to get from him. He'd either pull off a fantastic shot from like 30 yards out against Long Eaton or whatever it was, or he'd like just fall on his bottom and completely miss something. So yeah, I don't know. I think Denton. Not I'm saying that he's that kind of player, but he's had a big impact with the fans, I would say. And I feel like in 10 years' time, people will be saying in the pub, "Oh, do you remember that Tom Denton? Do you remember how tall he was?" You know, I can see that being a topic of conversation.
Jeff King's quite interactive on Twitter.
He is.
That could be another one as a cult hero, just because he is. You know, you can message him and he replies, sort of thing. So he has got that fan interaction, and he's a good player as well. So I think Jeff King could be added into that list.
Yeah, good shout.
And the final question. So this would be a hard one. Who is going to become the villain? So who will end up going to a rival club, scoring a goal against us that conspires that means we do something or other in a match, or he's going to be the guy that comes back and gets a red card because he smashes one of our players and he becomes a bit of a figure with us or something like that? Who's going to become the villain?
Ooh. It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, in terms of like a red card, you can maybe see like a Jack McCourt leaving the club, coming back, and we know what he can do in terms of his crunching tackles. I could definitely see anywhere he slides in and destroys one of our midfielders or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say James Rowe because he's a manager, not a player. But...
Just don't go there.
do you know what I mean, though? I feel like he sort of has put himself into that villain role now. Whereas before, everyone loved him, but he's gone from hero to zero quite literally. But yeah, in terms of a player, I don't know. That's a really, really tough question. I'm not really sure.
What about Melvin Minter going away? Hardly ever played in a couple of cup games. Goes somewhere else, does well. We need to win a game to get promoted. He saves a penalty or something. You think, Melvin, why?
So what do you see happening for the rest of the season then? What's your prediction?
Well, yeah, we seem to be making a bit of a fist of getting into the playoffs, don't we? I do think we'll just about scrape in there, but as for actually going on and winning them, I personally can't see it, to be honest with you. I just think there's too many other teams in the top 7 who are in really good form at the moment. So, personally, I think the ship sailed on promotion this season. And but to be honest, I back Cork to get his own squad in and challenge next season. So I'm not overly disappointed about it, considering all the injuries and all the off-pitch disruption.
What about you, Tom?
I don't want to say the word injuries, but it has kind of derailed the season. Unfortunately, me and other Tom suffered Halifax on Monday, and you just think if you had Shamanga, Rowe, Jack Clark, Ollie Leakey playing, Carline. Who else am I missing? There's got to be some more people I can chuck in there.
Luke Kroll.
Do we lose that game?
No, not for
me.
Probably
not. Carline, Clark, and Rowe, have they even played 20 games between them this season? Because I think Carline only played about 7, 8, 9 games or something. Clark's maybe played less than a handful. Rowe's played.
Rowe played 10, I think. Rowe got 5 goals in 10 games, which says it all about him.
Probably only played 20 games between them. It's
pretty much. That's mental.
Although I broke my toe kicking a chair the other day. So the first thing I thought was, if I was a Chesterfield footballer, how would I explain that I'm going to be out for like the next month with a broken toe? I accidentally kicked a chair. To finish off, so where can people listen to / interact with you? Give yourself a plug.
Plug. I think if you want to listen direct, go to Twitter. I've got an addiction more than anything. So if you want to message us, you normally find us on Twitter, or of course the podcast that goes out on a Friday. Normally it's 12 o'clock, but you never know these days what time it's going to be out.
It's usually a Friday before the big kick-off on a Saturday. So you can find us on social media. Just use the @handle @SpireitesWrite on Twitter and search SpireitesWrite on Facebook and Instagram, and we should pop up on all reputable social media platforms.
And Shaw can now break into the area and supported by Denton and There's Maguire. Cleared as far as Denton, and Chesterfield are back in front. Stop him, or maybe not. And Manchi continues, and there is the hat-trick. Tom Denton can claim the match ball.